Hello, welcome to the Real, Your Ideal podcast. How are you doing today, Sandy?
I'm doing great. I'm loving fall, everything about it.
Good.
How are
I'm
you
putting on
doing?
my lip gloss. My lips are chapped, so please ignore that.
Important. Self-care as we get into values. It's a
Yes.
premonition. What's the word they call it? Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing of our conversation today. Yes, I did all sorts of self-care things this morning and had a great experience doing the value assessment that you sent me.
Right?
And I even went back and listened to our old podcast that we did on the happiness factor, episode 5 of season 1, which was it talked about values too. And so I went back and listened to that. That was my research this week, was listening to an old podcast of ours.
And I love it that we're focusing on the value part of the happiness factor because it's probably I think it's the most important and it's the least understood. And we only have so much time. So we
Right,
might as well
right.
hit the deep stuff, the most impactful.
So let's dig in. Let's talk about this happiness factor though, because it was happiness value cubed times happiness equals value cubed times action, or right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. I
So
can remember it was times or plus action. So it's okay. So today we're talking about the value cubed or just one of the V's.
we're talking about value cubed because you have to look at them together in my mind. And we'll
Okay.
talk about each piece, but there's having them, the whole thing with cubed, back to math, and I'm going to use the general math that we all learned in grade school and into high school, that whole exponential power of the cubed is what gives value the bang for its buck. And by just focusing on one, if the other two are 0 or 1 or even negative, there's no impact with that value cubed. If one of the three factors either has a negative impact or a nil impact or very little. So there's a power behind the power of value is the power of the cubed. It's the power of the interaction of the three.
So to dig into a little bit of math, I'm going to say this isn't actually cubed because your 3 V's could equal something different. It's not one number cubed. It's like this V1 could equal 10. This V2 could be 2. This V3 could be 0. And if it's 0, then all of them, it's multiply them out. It's all 0.
It's all 0. It doesn't have the mathematical impact of having high numbers, but exactly.
Okay, good. Okay. So I love math problems.
It's math problems. And then starting with the math problem, just to kind of keep it easy for the listeners too, I'm not going to get into the story behind the happiness factor, but asking yourself, and I ask my kids this when I finish a phone call with them, not every time, but a lot of times, what's your happiness factor at this point in time, not this moment in time, but this point in your life from a scale from 1 to 10, lowest to highest. And so by asking what's your happiness factor, and you have to know what your baseline is too. Some people tend to be more positive and optimistic and have a higher happiness factor. Some have a baseline that's a little lower. But by starting with the example with my kids on what is your happiness factor, then you unpack it. And as you unpack it on why it is high, why it's a little lower than you'd like it to be, it goes back to those 2 factors that equal the happiness factor, which is what actions are you taking, but more importantly, the why on what's your value cubed, what's either holding you up or bringing you up. And 100% of the time you can apply the value cubed on how it's impacting your happiness factor.
Okay. So let's talk about the V's. What are they? There's 3 of them. The first V is,
let's go with the easy one. The first V is values, and that's your core values. That is really, I say it's the easiest. It's easiest to know and fun to figure out, but it's the most difficult to apply to daily life Nice to know, but what do you do with them? So these
Right.
are, I call this, the values are the gift that you give to the world. It's your innate value DNA. It's your core values. It is your innate being. Now, the whole nurture versus nature, you're born with them, but your experiences are going to shape them. Meaning, I'll give an example would be one of my core values is integrity. Life experiences that where I dealt with people with negative integrity have impacted the intensity and how much I need to honor that value because of life experience. So they're core values. It's the gift you give to the world. Because at the end of the day, and we'll talk about this, how this comes back to purpose, it's honoring those values and how you honor those in interaction with the other two are really core. What you do with them, other than saying, wow, I did this exercise and this is great. These are my values. How do they interact with the other two? So the next one,
Yeah.
go ahead, Amy.
So what you just mentioned is sometimes those core values, I want to say they kind of hibernate for a bit because there's not because when I was going through this, I was like, yeah, these are my core values, but I don't engage them all the time. Does that make sense? They kind of hibernate, but then there's situations where they come out. It's like,
totally.
Oh, that feels really wrong to me. It's kind of, you had mentioned something before about non-negotiables. These are your non-negotiables. Like these are where your real values are. So anyway,
you're exactly right, Amy. And where people struggle with it is if you understand that they're your non-negotiables, how do you take steps to say, you have to honor that and say, I can't be in a situation where there's a lack of integrity. And that might sound simple, but integrity to me is there's a pretty black and white line there. There's not a lot of gray area for me, but by recognizing that, I can be honest with the situation. I can have conversations, I can communicate, but then I also have to know at what point I have to walk away, because it's never going to offer a positive benefit to my V cubed equation unless I do something to change it.
Right. Okay. All right. Second V
is value. The value, and keep in mind, so I love when you look at the definition of value in the dictionary, you have a noun. The noun is the gifts, right? That's your core values, the gifts you give. Now we're getting into the verb. It's the next two are value and valued. Okay. Value is what you give to the world, right? It's the value you give. It is, so the G is give, so we had gift, it's what you give. So then here's where you put, it's the value you give to the world, but it's not just your core values. It's your experience. It's your relationships. It's all the things that have happened in your life, in your life story, that bring value to the world, that bring value to your employer, to your clients. It might be your education, but it's really the value you give. Okay. And then the valued part is the value you get, meaning you can give all the value out there, but you have to, the outside world needs to value you for it. Okay. So the value you give, and then there's the value you get, is it has to be valued for it. Even more importantly, you have to be able to recognize the value in those around you. Okay. Because life is not a solo sport. I say this all the time. And the valued, meaning, you have to be sure that you're being, back to the value, you have to be sure that you're getting valued, but it's also, you're finding that value in those around you. Valued means applying value to all the other people in your life. And that's the hardest one, because we tend to value what we know, which is us. Okay. But that's also what we struggle with. Back to the reciprocal, the value I give, I want to be valued for it, but somebody who's very different than me or has a completely different set of core values, life experience, this is where we get into bias. This is where we get into you're not like me, I'm not going to understand, but it's understanding that complementary nature of the gifts that we bring to our lives. So really the value and the valued is understanding both. I need to be accepted for what I bring and what I honor and how I do that. But I also have to, I have to feel valued, but so do the other people in my life. I have to understand that. Again, that's the most difficult one, because if you go back to situations or relationships, even use the kids as an example, it's easiest to connect with the child that shares the same core values. It doesn't mean the other values are wrong, but it's hard to wrap your brain around something that isn't core to you. So that's what takes the work. And because if you look at just how we spend our lives, so just, I'm going to say big picture. So the value and does the value valued make sense?
Yes.
The value you give, the value you get, but part of that value you get comes from others, right?
Yeah.
But part of that is when you look at that big picture is with the whole value equation is being able to break it down and say, in this situation, what's not quite right about it. And if you think about it, not just, the V cubed, how to apply it, an easy way to apply it is think through the people you're interacting with and how you're spending your time. Okay. And then if you're thinking, okay, here are the people I'm interacting with this, let's just say work. Let's just say, I'm going to say my happiness factor. I'm typically, if I'm an 8, life is pretty good for me. If I'm a 9, life is really good. Okay. But if I start slipping below 8 and how I feel, so if it's a 7, okay, I'm a 7, I'm a 6. You pretty quickly, if you were to ask me, Sandy, why are you a 6 or a 7 right now? It's like, oh, I got this. It's with work. Work is just not where it needs to be. Dissect that a little bit. Well, it's a particular client that I'm working with. And then if you dissect it, usually it's relational or how you're spending your time. It's a client I'm working with because it's taking me, I underbid the job and it's taking me 12 hours a day to work on it. And I have no time. One of my core values is fun and adventure. I have no room for that. So I'm able to unpack what exactly is it. And it's usually going to be how you're spending your time. I hate doing this. I'm setting up their chart of accounts. It's the most boring work. I don't feel, they think that I bring so much more to the table, but they think I'm a general accountant. Well, I'm not being valued by it, but you can take these situations and dissect them. And they're going to come down to the core human need of wanting to be valued for what you bring to the table. And then the other side is you can quickly find out if it's all about me, maybe I'm not recognizing what's going on with the other people because they're pushing me away because I'm not valuing them, or I haven't communicated to them what's going on, or a core value is not being honored. But as you dissect, you really have to get to the meat of the value component. Are you being valued for what you do? Are you bringing your best value forward? And are you understanding the value of the others on the team? Or are they having the same if they're having a problem with you, and because you're not understanding what they're doing. And I've done this before. Remember me talking about that's a waste of time. I used to say that's a waste of time. And what a way to devalue somebody else. Well, is my team going to want to work with me then? No. Right. Because I keep telling them that what they do is a waste of time, because what I'm saying is I know everything. So part of dissecting it is, why is that relationship not working? Are they really not working that hard? They're probably maybe not lazy. Am I jumping to a conclusion, or if I unpack it or ask questions, is there something I'm doing that's devaluing them or not bringing their best foot forward? Am I not organizing my team? Now I threw a lot of different situations out there.
I know.
I threw a lot of different situations out there, but okay, so maybe one thing, let's do a real life situation. And then we need to unpack your values. Pick just something really simple that you're not throwing somebody under the bus, but Can you think of an example, Amy, like in the last week, and we don't have to give names, that maybe your happiness factor wasn't as high as you would have liked it to be?
I'm trying to think of an example. I wasn't ready for this. I was like,
We'll go
I'm
back to,
like
you know
trying to
what?
think of my own.
Or how about when it's higher? Even better. Did you have a point where it's like, oh my gosh, this is a great day. I'm having a great week. Can you think of the last time? Let's go happy. Let's go the happy side. Can you think of an example or a period recently when you're like, wow, things are really going well?
Yes, I will say I worked with a client on Tuesday and I haven't done an on-site residential client in a really long time. And
Mhm.
so this was a first time in a while that I had been in someone's home working with them. And it was a wonderful afternoon. Like I only spent 2 hours with her and it was all talking, but it really resonated with me because she was a very authentic to the way she was feeling about her home and things that were happening in her home. And she was honest and we came up with some solutions and she was happy, excited. So I felt valued. Like I think of your whole happiness factor, and it aligned with my core values, which was aligning her space to what her needs were and finding peace and calm in her space and making it functional. And then I felt valued because she was very excited about the conversations and she felt better when I left. And I think I was valuing her and what she needed. And
Mhm.
that's why she was valuing me,
Sure.
because it was like a back and forth kind of conversation. How's
Which
that?
is the best, client, uh, best customer relationship. And I heard the word authentic. So all
Yeah.
this, in order to truly value and there's authenticity to yourself, to others, to what you bring to the table. You
Yeah.
know, again, you knew your sweet spot, and there was probably a lot of this that you knew right away when she told you, hey, this is what I've got. You knew you could help her.
Yeah.
And
It was a discovery meeting. It was a discovery appointment. So it was the first time we had met. Um, I always appreciate when people come to me honest with what the issue is. Like there's some people who present themselves and and there's this everything looks perfect and
Mhm.
they're presenting themselves as perfect, but they've got this one little issue, their pantry. But then when you start digging deeper, you can see that there's this whole functional system that's creating this pantry issue. And so it's like a bigger conversation. And I always appreciate when clients will open themselves up to those bigger conversations and not just say, just focus on my pantry. That's all I want. And so, anyway, she was very open to the full conversation, the full discussion.
The full value circle too begins with being vulnerable, because you have to honor who you are, what you bring to the table, and be open up for why in this case, there's a need, right? There's a need.
Yeah.
And here we're using an example of something that happens during the day. An example I'll give, and going back to our conversation on the happiness factor, when I went back and I didn't listen to it this time recently, I'll go back now, but I kept talking about how joyful I was in Boise, but I never talked about why. And there is something to be said for, now there are big bangs like that. When things do go right, it's great to self-assess and say, okay, why was that? Why am I on cloud nine right now? Why did I feel like I hit it out of the park? Not just for me, but that whole thing went right. It's great to dissect that and say, here are the whys, right? Going back to
Yeah.
the value cubed. One thing about when I moved to Boise is I had a clean slate. When you have a clean slate, everybody loves a new school year, right? Because you get to start over. That report card is all new. All the relationships are new. How I'm going to fill my day. It's a clean slate. It's much harder if your happiness factor is low and you're already working a job, you're in a bad relationship, you have a friend that's draining you, you have all these things going on, or maybe you don't. You have uncontrollables going on. There's something about a clean slate that you get to choose how you spend your time, who you spend it with, and you honor your values while doing it, right? And you can more clearly recognize, it's much easier to recognize a friend and assess, maybe somebody new that I went to lunch with. Do I want this to be an ongoing relationship? Do I want to spend a lot of time and invest in this relationship? It's much easier to start out new. So back to Boise and honoring part of as the older we get, I think the better we are at honoring those things and seeing those things, because we have the life experience to know what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. And you seek out the things that are very specific and they're aligned with your core values, being valued, like everything. Yes.
And that's why this core value exercise is a great one. And then to link it up, go back to those because the values go to how you are valued. Okay. Yeah. Because you have your core values, they lead to talents. They lead to, you're going to do things you're naturally good at, and they're going to lead to how you are valued. There's more things to that. Like we said, you can get credentials, education, life experience. People have niches, because I have a niche in healthcare doesn't mean I was born with a core value of healthcare. That's an experience that I bring to the table, but it's the core values that emphasize that. So let's look at your values. So Amy, you did the value exercise.
I did. You want my top 5?
You know what? Go with the 10, because here's one thing I like to do is, if you feel really strongly that here are my top 5, fine. But the reality is I like to take values a step further. The bigger thing in the values, I like to say 10, your 10 top. And if there aren't 10, make it 8. If it's 12, fine, because the key is finding the themes within those values. And what you're going to find is there's probably 3 predominant themes among your top values. So go through your 10. Let's start with your 10. And I say that because you had said you had a hard time narrowing it down, I think even from 17, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, I went through, I don't know how many are on the first page, but I went through all of them and I got to like 29. And then I was like, all right, she wants me to get to 10. I was like, okay, then I got to 17. And then I got to 17. That's how I got to it. So, okay, pause. I'm going to cut this out. So when you're talking about my top 10, is this going off of your sheet? Because they only gave me a top 5 in my report.
They did. And quite frankly, it's like, you look at all of those together, go with the 10 that you highlighted. And they don't have to be in order, because quite frankly, I think what the other one does, Amy, is the other one is more theme related, because it gets down to 5 and it's looking for themes more than words, because you really only had 2 that went back, but they teamed to. So just go with the list. Go with the list.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you sent me this list and I went through this list, and there's a total of how many on this list?
Oh gosh.
Hold on. I've got it, the numbers, because I did the calculations. Okay. There's 71.
There's 71. I was going to say 50 to 60. There you go.
There's 71. And I had to pick between what was really important, slightly important, and not important. And this was really hard, because I went down the list and I'm like, well, everything is important. I had a really hard time saying something was not important. So there's only 2 items that I put in not important, which was kind of funny. And then I said, all right, so some of these are more than slightly important. So then I could get my really important. And I ended up with 27 and really important. And then I was challenged with highlighting 10.
Right.
Okay, because you wanted me to get down to 10. And so I did. I got down to dependability, and this is in alphabetical order. Okay. Yep. Dependability, family, gratitude, health, hope. And hope, I realized that is a non-negotiable for me. I have to have hope, and I have to be around people who have hope, that because it really hurts my heart when people aren't hopeful. So that is definitely independence, inner peace, strength, inner strength, learning, mindfulness. And then if I were to add a number 11, it would just be peace.
Okay.
Like all in all peace.
All in all peace, not just your inner peace, but overall peace. That kind of goes with hope.
Yeah.
So Amy, what I'll ask you to do, and I've looked at these when you sent those, what are some themes in these are words, okay? What themes were you feeling, or if you could throw out, and I'll throw out some themes that I've seen from the outside, but are there themes that you're feeling that you could cluster some of these together?
Yes, the theme of calmness, like the theme of like I think the peace, the inner peace, the mindfulness, the gratitude, it all feels very honoring my surroundings and being surrounded by that feeling of hope and of just calm. And I don't know. That's one.
That's one. Another one I'd say would be, so I have a clustering in mine. I'm not going to go through all mine, but mine it's relationships. I have some that are relationship driven, and but there's always a word that kind of goes with it. And I'm not quite sure what your word is. I put meaningful relationships, because you don't need a great number, but if even the gratitude, the family, the dependability, the power of the relationship, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Deep, meaningful, real would be another word, but a not just relationship, but a strong, meaningful relationship. And then growth,
Mm-hmm.
I saw the word growth in some of the other things that you had done, but growth, even in hope, there's growth, right?
Yeah.
Hope is, you got to have that. There's got to be somewhere to grow, right? Did you feel that back to the clustering, that growth is important?
Yes, completely. Learning, growth, like all of that was very, very strong in mine. And what you said about deep, meaningful relationships, spot on. I am the world's worst networker. Like, I do not like to go and have superficial conversations with people. I do not like to go to parties where it's just a bunch of acquaintances that I don't really know. Like, that is such a painful evening to me.
Right.
So, but if I'm gathered with my core group of close friends that know me, and I can, like, there's no superficial talk, like, it's really, I love that. I walk away and I feel full, and I feel, it just brings me joy. So it's very interesting, all of this, because here's what I will say. I have this fear of retiring and being like, and I know this might be deep for the podcast, but going into my inner circle and not expanding like outside of that, because as you retire, you start to possibly not have the circle of friends as much.
Even as much of a network. I get that from working remotely, right?
Right, exactly. It's kind of the same thing. Like, how do you keep putting yourself out there, but still have this calm peace that you're looking for? Like, my perfect day is sitting on the patio, reading a book, drinking coffee outside, and just being there. I don't need people. But I can't do that my whole life. That would not be good.
Which is back to, again, we're sitting here, talking about some deep things, but I have an entire, workshop that's on perfecting the pivot. But the first 4 sessions is all about deep diving into this whole segment and using real life stories to dissect it, to better understand yourself, to make those decisions for the pivot, right? So it's a lot deeper than this, but this is why, Amy, we do those exercises like child's play, the real resume. What would I do on my birthday? Because they uncover these same things that are here, but then it becomes actionable and saying, oh, when didn't I honor that? When did I? How do I apply that going forward? Couple of things I'll tell you that one thing that came to mind with me, and part of this is I do know you now because we do the podcast together.
Right.
And so I was really curious to look at this and see this and again, put kind of my own spin on the clustering and the themes that I saw in it. But well, one thing came up now, but the thing that came up when I looked at this is I thought, you have several in here that I would say are personal well-being, self-awareness, health, inner peace, mindfulness. And I kept picturing, and then you had the other things that were growth, meaningful relationships. To me, using the visual of the oxygen mask that falls down in the airplane is you. You've got this down pat. The airline stewardess never needs to say to you, take care of you first, and then the kids around you. You can't help anybody else without yourself first. Tell me if I'm wrong, but what I see is Amy, is so important for Amy to have Amy. You can't take care of everybody else if you don't have that inner peace or take care of yourself first. You don't need any instructions on the air mask because you totally get it that you have to have it on you before you can take care of them. Right. And then it's perfect. I mean, you're up flying the plane pretty soon.
Well, the problem is I'll be like, sorry, I'm going to say no to that because I need to take care of myself.
I need to take care of myself because I can't take care of you until I take care of this. And then when I take care of this,
you're spot on. That's very
in a great way. You're taking care of the plane. And then I think
there's good and bad to all sides of this. Like you can flip them. It's kind of like your strengths. There's positive to strengths, but there's also that negative of
the
blind spots. Yes. That they create.
And then the other thing that I thought of is you had told me, and again, how we're all different and how we have to honor ourselves in our relationships. You had just shared with me that there was a friend that had something going on that you didn't know about. And it really bothered you because, back to the deep relationships, you were kicking yourself for not knowing, right? And a lot of people wouldn't do that. And it was just such in your mind, it felt like a failing, but back to the blind spot, you are such that friend, you take it all upon yourself to make sure that it is reciprocal, right? And it has to go both ways. And there's even a deeper value in the V squared with those people that you have a deep relationship with, right?
Oh, completely. Yes. Yeah. Spot on.
So we did a little deep diving. So the values DNA, back to that is it's great to do. The next step that I would say back to homework is do the values exercise, look for the themes, do the ahas of, oh my gosh, of course that would never work, or this is so me. Think of the analogies, but then the best thing to do as the next step, which we don't have time to do on this podcast, is go through your time, your life timeline, and just start with just think about when was I really happy? Different periods of life. When was I really not very happy? When were bad spots? When were really good spots? And then go back and try to apply your core values. And were you valued? Were you valuing others? And apply this to different spots in time. And then know that there are uncontrollables. This is what you can control, right? There are uncontrollables in your life that cause these things too. You can't control everything. If we could, we'd all be 10s all the time if we applied it perfectly. But being able to know what the uncontrollables are too. We'd all like to write our own story. We do the best we can, but there are some surprises, right?
Right.
But the power and value is applying it. And the aha moments come when you go back in time and you're able to associate these things you're seeing on paper to what's happened, because knowing our stories and understanding it, back to having how the values develop, is being able to apply them in what's happened to us in the past so we can better write our story in the future.
Right. So these values lead to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with a group of people this week and we were having a conversation about happiness and joy.
Mhm.
And we were talking about how joy is something that is so, like whether you feel joy or not, it's pretty internal. Like that's like an internal type of how you view things. And if you're joyful, and happiness is a little bit more fleeting. It comes and it goes.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
I thought that was such an
that was a
interesting
very good
observation.
observation.
Yeah, it was. When I heard that, and we were having this conversation about values and leading to happiness, and I thought that was very interesting. So knowing that and embracing that happiness, because our V's aren't always going to be in a good spot,
Mhm.
but we can get them back as long as we're
I
looking
know.
and trying to align them to, if we're in where we're being valued, doing things that are of value and aligned with our core values. I think that's a very um, something to be mindful of.
And I think the hardest one that can actually be the easiest, the one most difficult that I find are for people to truly value or understand valuing others, because we all get so caught up in ourselves. But if we focus on that one, it's the one that's ignored the most, that is the easiest fix. Sometimes it's simply asking somebody, tell me, it's not saying give me your list of core values, but asking what's important to them, asking more questions, being more
Right.
curious. I always have one quick way to find out what's going on with somebody who says they're in a bad relationship with a significant other. You know, the first question I'll ask, and typically it's women, they'll say, oh, he doesn't understand, or it's not going well, I think I deserve better, or blah, blah, blah. And usually it's in a dating circumstance, right? And but it really can be, and I'll say, what does he want? What's important to him? Well, what's important to him is to be with me. Well, no, that's not an answer. That's telling me right there that that other person isn't feeling valued. If you can't even express what's important to them, right? Or
Right.
you hadn't thought about it, you have to hesitate. Chances are they're not getting that back, or you're not having the conversation and it's one dimensional. There's reasons there are books like the men are from Mars and women are from Venus, or did I get that backwards? Or why we have different love languages, and all those things are great tools, because it's understanding how to best value others and giving you a language to talk about that. That's what that's doing. But if you're only worried about your side of the story, and the best people do this. I mean, it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
horrible people that answer it this way,
Yeah.
but they get so caught up in their minds and their stories that they don't even recognize what the other person needs.
Right. So that's what was fascinating to me about this list of values, this list of 71, because and getting it down to 10. I'm like, how many combinations could there be? And they're all really good values. So
Right.
there's not one of them that says, oh my gosh, you value winning. That's wrong. Like there's not a wrong to it.
It's
There's
not wrong, but which ones are non-negotiables, right?
right,
That's
right. But
probably
some
the key. Which
people,
ones, or which ones really are incredible, the most important to you.
right. And some people, it could be winning. And that's okay. That's their core value. And you know what? That makes them good in different things than what I would be, because I think winning was one of mine. No, it was slightly important. So I was like, that's probably my not no important. But knowing that these values come through everybody, and everybody's different, and there's good in all of it.
There's good in all of it. And it is a good exercise. Someone who you're close to in your life, just typically your significant other, maybe it's somebody you work, a business partner, your kid.
Yeah.
It's good to understand their values, because there
Yeah.
are, rather than guessing, you have Tom do it. Because I have, one of my core values is fun. And I remember it was mind blowing to Garrett. He's like, how can you have fun as one of your core values? And he had, I think inner peace, which is all fine, but it's like, that's
Yeah.
good. But it's good for us to know that, because he also knows by understanding that. Like last night we went to dinner and he's like, let's go check out this distillery. Oh my gosh, my adventures.
And you're like, woohoo.
But then on my side, by understanding that with him, when I am out of town, I don't need to FaceTime or have all this time. And I know that he needs to have some quality time talking to me. And that little bit of giving him that give on something that I don't necessarily need and understanding makes the world a difference in our relationship. And even more so because we know we're doing it for the other. We know that we're valuing the needs of the other and not just what we need. So there's that. They're huge. So my point in the little things become the huge things when being curious and seeking to understand what's important to the people that are around you. Yeah. Talk about exponential. That's the V.
Oh my gosh.
That really explodes.
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm thinking of this. We have this one situation in our house. So this is going to be a good exercise to share with Tom, because we have this one situation. We have a dog that barks at the wind blowing outside, and she's got a really
sweetie.
I know, she's very sweet and loving, but she likes to bark about 4 or 5 times a day. She just like, something's happening outside. She barks. Well, when Tom's home, he yells then. So he escalates it. So she's barking, and then he's like, Bella, be quiet, Bella. So it like, and to me, it's like, oh my gosh, it just went into double chaos instead of single chaos, because now I have the dog barking and I have Tom yelling at the dog to stop barking. And so it's actually kind of comical, because I was like, I don't think you know what that does to me, because this peace thing has like resonate. It's like, oh my gosh, I know she'll stop barking, but we don't. So it's like I don't think he understands how it makes me feel. And it's not a big deal. It's just funny. Like it's just one of those things that's happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the little things. Back to me spending a half an hour FaceTiming Garrett, even though I want to be watching Ted Lasso with my brother, and knowing that that's important to him, just like for him to do these little magical mystery things that they feed my soul, and
Yep. Okay. I'm going to do this with Tom. I'll let you know. Okay.
All right. Well, we better stop, Amy.
I know we could talk all day. I love the value conversation. I love the happiness factor, just the whole thing, because taking these values and multiplying them by action to move you closer to the happiness it can be a game changer. So kudos to you on that. I think this is a wonderful thing you're doing.
And the last thing I'll say is, if it's not somebody close to you, because you're not going to go pick your client, you did a great job, but the client that you went to, you're not going to say, here are my core values, but you're going to know how to shine with those, what to present to be valued. It's on them, on if they're valuing you for it, and you to decide which people you ultimately want to work with long-term, right? And how to best present yourself.
Yeah. And not everybody's a good match. Right. So I've learned that over the time. So anyway, thank you, Sandy.
Have a great weekend, Amy, and we will talk next week.
All right. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.